I have buried 3 people, and I still light the lantern every evening as if one of them might walk back up from the water, the southern coast of the Maya lowlands, the height of the late classic years, when the salt trade feeds cities I will never see. The tide has not yet decided which way it wants to go this morning. Salt air reaches me before the light does. It sits on the skin instead of passing through it. Somewhere behind me, embers are still orange under gray ash, and the clay pots have not forgotten last night's boiling. Storm light presses low over the water, the gray that means rain by midday. Not now. Rain washes the salt pans clean, so I do not mind it. My hands know the shape of this morning before my eyes open all the way. I reach for the axe, not to strike anything living, only to split driftwood small enough for a fire that burns even, not hungry. The wood is damp outside, dry underneath. It always is here. I do not think of myself as someone who does anything remarkable. I boil water until the sea gives up what it hides inside itself. I feed people who walk far to reach my stall. That is the whole of it. Before I go on, where are you listening from tonight? A quiet room, a cozy home. Somewhere the stars come through a window. I love knowing where these stories travel. It reminds me we are all connected by the same stars, the same stories, the same warmth. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you are. And if you enjoy peaceful journeys into the past, consider subscribing so we can meet here again. The fire wants tending before anything else wants my attention. I crouch by the ring of stones and feed it the driftwood, small pieces first, letting them catch before I trust it with anything larger. Smoke rises thin and gray, bending sideways in the wind off the water, carrying last night's fish smell into this morning's air. Behind me, in the shade of the palm thatch lean-to, 3 clay jars wait full of seawater, carried up from the shallows before dawn. I do not remember when carrying water stopped feeling like work. It became the shape of my arms instead, the ache that lives in them and leaves by mid-morning. You're late, I say, not turning around, because I already know the footsteps. The crabs were out, says the boy. Yun, 9 years old, maybe 10. His mother has never been certain, and neither have I. I had to go around them. They pinch. They have never once pinched you. They looked like they wanted to. I let that stand. He sets down 2 jars, harder than he needs to, water sloshing at the rims, and glances at me to see if I noticed he didn't spill them. I did. I don't say so. I show him again how the clay support cylinders sit beneath the boiling pot, 3 of them, spaced so the fire licks up evenly and the pot doesn't tip. He has watched me do this perhaps 40 mornings now. His hands still move like he's asking the clay's permission instead of simply placing it. Not asking, I say. Deciding. The clay doesn't care what you feel about it. Grandmother's chickens care what I feel. They peck harder when I'm in a bad mood. That is a different kind of clay. He laughs at that, quick and short, and tips the first jar into the pot. The seawater hisses against warmed clay, steam lifting off it pale and thin. This part takes patience. The water must boil down slow, lose itself a little at a time, until what's left is not water at all, but something white and fine, worth carrying inland on someone's back for 3 days of walking. I chip a sliver of dried fish from the rack above the coals, salted 3 days past, and hand it to Yun without looking. He eats it fast, the way children eat things they're not sure they're allowed to enjoy. Will I sell today at the stall? You will carry. Carrying and selling are not the same thing yet. When your hands stop asking the clay's permission. You said that yesterday too. It was true yesterday too. He makes a face at that, unconvinced, and goes back to watching the pot, kicking at a loose stone with his heel out of something closer to restlessness than patience. The tide continues its slow retreat, uncovering a wider strip of gray-brown sand streaked with morning light, the color of a bruise not yet healed. Gulls work the shallows behind us, loud and unbothered. By the time the sun clears the tree line, the first pot has reduced by half. I test it with 2 fingers, the way I was taught, not by tasting, but by how the water starts clinging differently to skin once it wants to become something else. Today we finish early, I tell Yun. A boat leaves for the market at midday. I want 3 baskets ready before it does. Can I ride in it this time? No. Why not? Because you fell out of the last one. That was one time. It was enough times. He grumbles something under his breath that I choose not to hear clearly, and goes to fetch more wood. I add fuel to the fire and do not think about what I do. I only know the salt must be done. The walk from the salt kitchen to the market clearing takes the length of time it takes the sun to climb one hand's width above the tree line. Yun carries 2 baskets balanced on a yoke across his shoulders. I carry 3. The path winds inland through low scrub before opening onto the wider trail worn smooth by generations of feet that were not mine and are not his either. The baskets smell of brine and wood smoke, salt cakes wrapped in broad leaves to keep them from crumbling. Beneath them, in a smaller basket carried separately, sit strips of salted fish, dried dark and firm, and a clay jar of balchet. The honeyed drink I let ferment through the rainy weeks, sweet enough now that I can smell it sealed. Why do you carry that one apart? Yun asks, meaning the jar. Because it doesn't like being jostled. Neither do I. And you don't carry me apart from anything. You are heavier than the jar and complain more. He considers whether this is an insult and decides it probably is, but doesn't have a good answer ready, so he lets it go. The trail crosses a shallow creek where flat gray stones sit half submerged, worn round by water that's had far longer than either of us to work on them. I stop here most mornings, not because I need to, but because stopping has become part of what the morning is. I set down my baskets and take the small stone tool from the pouch at my waist, running it once, twice, against the flattest stone to sharpen the edge I used to scrape crusted salt from the pots. The sound it makes, stone against stone, only exists if you're close enough and quiet enough to let it exist. Yun crouches beside me, more out of boredom than curiosity, picking at the moss on a nearby rock while he watches. Are we almost there? We are exactly as far as we were yesterday when you asked. That's not an answer. It's the same distance every morning. You could measure it yourself by now. He mutters that measuring is boring, which I don't argue with because it is. From the pouch, I also take a small copper disc, traded 3 seasons back from a canoe crew who came down from the north with obsidian and cacao, and 1 basket of things I'd never seen before. I paid more for it than I should have. I don't use it for anything. I only carry it, and on mornings like this, I polish it against my sleeve until it holds a small, blurred smear of sky. What's it for? Yun asks, the same question every time, as if hoping the answer might change. Nothing, it's for nothing. That's allowed sometimes, to keep a thing because it's shiny, not because it's useful. Can I have it when you're old? I am already old by your count. You're old, not dying old. I appreciate the distinction. We walk on. The trail widens as it nears the clearing, and I can hear the market before I see it, the hum of many voices deciding, together but separately, what things are worth this morning. Someone argues gently over the price of obsidian blades. Someone else calls out that their maize is fresher than the stall beside them, which it may or may not be. Copal smoke drifts sweet and resinous from near the plaza's edge, mixing with roasting maize and crushed leaves underfoot. Yun's steps quicken without his noticing. Slow down, I tell him. The stalls aren't going anywhere before we do. You always walk faster too, once you can hear it. I hadn't noticed that I do. I slow my steps deliberately, and after a moment, so does he, and we walk the last stretch at the pace of two people in no particular hurry, even though, in truth, we both are. The clearing opens ahead, rows of low platforms holding goods on woven mats, palm thatch awnings throwing shade across faces I mostly recognize, and a few I don't. My spot waits at the eastern edge, near enough to the plaza's center to be found, far enough from the loudest stalls not to be shouted over. Now, I say, we begin. The market fills slowly, and then all at once. By the time I've unwrapped the first basket of salt cakes, 3 people already wait, not impatient, only present. The way people are present at a stall they've visited enough mornings to trust it'll still be there. I lay the leaves flat across the mat, salt cakes in pale rows, fish dark and firm beside them, the balchet jar set slightly apart. Yun kneels at the corner and arranges the smaller cakes into a second row, mimicking the spacing of my hands. Not touching, I remind him. Let them choose. A hand that reaches too fast makes people trust the salt less, not more. Why? Because eagerness looks like need. No one wants to buy from someone who needs it more than they do. An old woman kneels first across from me, the same one who comes most third mornings, trading woven cloth for salt and fish in amounts. She's never once asked me to calculate. We exchange goods with the unhurried formality of people who like the shape of the ritual more than they need the words inside it. The boy's learning quickly, she says, nodding toward Yun without looking at him directly. Slowly, I correct her. He's learning slowly. That's the only way it holds. I am right here, Yun says, not looking up from the cakes. We know, I say. The morning fills with the small transactions of a market day. Obsidian traded 3 stalls down, edges catching storm light in quick gray flashes. A boy no older than Yun weaving between platforms, with a basket of green chilies balanced on his head, calling out prices in a voice not yet broken. Copal smoke drifts low from the plaza's center. A man I don't recognize kneels at my mat and asks for cacao. I don't sell cacao. I point him toward the stall 2 rows over, where a woman trades nothing else, counting dark beans by hand into small woven pouches. He thanks me and moves on. Why don't we sell cacao too? Yun asks. It would be more. More isn't always better. A cook who tries to be a salt maker, and a cacao trader, and a weaver besides ends up doing 4 things badly instead of 1 thing well. That's what grandmother says about people who talk too much at once. Grandmother is wise. She also says you talk too much to the fire. Grandmother should mind her own fire. He grins at that and goes back to arranging cakes. And I let a silence settle that has nothing heavy in it. Only the ordinary quiet of 2 people working side by side. Later, once the morning crowd thins and Yun is occupied stacking empty leaf wrappers, a trader from farther up the coast, someone I've spoken with only a handful of times, asks, almost in passing, how a man ends up running a salt stall alone. No wife at the mat, no grown sons carrying baskets. My family was taken by sickness when I was young, I say plainly, the way I've learned to say it, a fact laid down and picked back up, not dwelt on. My uncle kept this stall before me and took me in when he didn't have to. I keep it now the way he kept it. That's most of the story. The trader nods, satisfied, and the conversation moves on to the price of chert, and I don't return to it again. Some things are best said once, plainly, and left to stand on their own weight rather than repeated until they wear a groove. The heat of midday softens by the time we start back, the sun leaning westward, throwing long shapes ahead of us on the trail. Yun walks beside me now instead of behind, the empty baskets light on his shoulders. I lead us along the shoreline instead of the direct path, where the sand runs wide and pale beneath a sky still undecided about the storm building far out over the water. The air here is thicker, salt heavy, carrying the day's warmth inside it. The tide has left long ribbons of darker sand where the water sat only hours before, and scattered across them, half buried, lie small pale shells. Yun crouches to gather a handful without being asked. "These are no good for anything," he says, turning one over in his palm. "No, they're not. So why am I picking them up? You tell me. You're the one doing it." He shrugs, unbothered by the lack of a satisfying answer, and pockets 3 of them anyway, tossing the rest back toward the waterline. We walk on. The wind comes off the water in slow pushes, carrying salt and drying weed. A pair of herons stand in the shallows further along, gray-white against darker water, still enough that Yun stops to throw a small stone near them, just to watch them startle and resettle. "Don't," I say, half a beat too late. "They're fine. Look, they're already back. They were fine before you threw the stone too. That's not the same as fine after." I don't have a good answer for that either, so I let it go. And we keep walking, the herons resuming their patient watch of the shallows behind us, as if the boy had never been there at all. "Are we having fish tonight?" Yun asks after a while. "We have fish most nights." "I know. I'm asking if it's the good kind, or the kind you make me eat anyway." "It's the kind that's available." "That's not an answer either. You're collecting a lot of those today." He laughs, short and genuine. And for a stretch after that we don't talk at all, just walk, the storm sitting unmoved on the horizon, the light shifting slowly deeper into gray. Once a week, sometimes twice when trade has been good, a canoe comes down from the inland river mouth to carry baskets of salt and dried fish further than either of us could walk in a day, toward cities whose names I know only as words other traders use. We reach the landing as the light folds slowly toward evening, the water calmer here, sheltered by a bend of mangrove roots. The canoe waits already, drawn half onto the mud bank, its hull dark with years of river water. 2 men load baskets, while a third checks the lashings. I recognize all 3 not friends, not strangers, something steadier and quieter than either. "Salt cakes 12, I say, setting baskets at the water's edge. "Dried fish 4 bundles. And this," I lift a smaller jar, sealed with wax, "goes to my sister's household upriver, if your route still passes near enough." The eldest of the 3 takes the jar with both hands. still passes, same as always. I don't have a sister by blood. There's a woman upriver, widow of a fellow cook I trained beside years ago. And each season I send what I can spare toward her household, not because it's owed, but because it seems worth doing. Yun watches the loading, uncharacteristically quiet, then tugs my sleeve. Can I hold one of the paddles, just to feel how heavy it is? Ask him, not me. It's his paddle, he asks, and the youngest of the 3 men hands it over with a shrug. And Yun holds it with both hands, testing its weight with the deep seriousness of someone weighing something far more important than a paddle. It's heavier than it looks, he announces, as if this settles some private argument he's been having with himself. Most things are. He hands it back, satisfied, and goes to poke at a crab shell near the mud instead, already moved on. The canoe sits low in the water, weighted with baskets, current pulling gently at its bow. Storm light moves across the river's surface in slow gray folds. Will they come back the same way? Yun asks, distracted, not looking up from the crab shell. Eventually, the river takes its time returning people. He shrugs at that, more interested in the shell than the answer. And I let him be. Not every question I offer needs to land somewhere deep. Sometimes a boy just wants to know if a paddle is heavy. The men push the canoe into the current, and we watch it find its balance, grow smaller. Round the bend, where the mangrove roots close in again, and disappear. The walk back takes longer than the walk out, though the distance is the same. The light by the time we reach the salt kitchen has gone deep gold. The sun dropped low beneath clouds that gathered all day without breaking. Yun sets down the yoke and settles onto the low stone bench beside the fire ring. Tired in the unhurried way of a body that's walked a full day and only now notices, I bank the coals lower, add a single piece of dry wood, and reach for the small clay lantern hanging from the lean-to's crossbeam. A wick set in fish fat oil, nothing fine, only a small, steady flame holding back the coming dark enough to see a hand in front of a face. I cup the flame until it steadies and hang it back where it's hung every evening for longer than Yun's been alive. Why do you always light at the same time? He asks, even when there's still light to see by. Because the dark doesn't ask permission before it arrives. He considers this then. Grandmother says you're strange about fire. Grandmother says a lot of things about me. She's not wrong, usually. No, I admit, usually not. He yawns, stretches, and doesn't push the question further, watching the small flame instead with the half attention of someone more tired than curious. I don't offer more explanation than I've already given. Some things are better left as habit observed than reason explained. The tide, beyond the dark line of mangrove at the shore's edge, continues its slow retreat. The last color drains from the sky, gold giving way to the deep blue that settles over this coast every evening. Are we eating soon? Yun asks. I'm starting to fall asleep sitting up. Soon. Don't fall asleep on the bench. You'll wake with a sore neck. I always wake with a sore neck. Then you already know the answer. He huffs, but pushes himself upright and goes to fetch the last of the dried fish from the rack, moving slower now, heavier with the day's walking. I sit a moment longer beside the small, steady light, listening to the fire settle into its low nighttime rhythm. The fire has burned down to its last quiet stage, flames gone. Only the deep orange breathing of coals beneath a thin gray skin of ash. Yun sleeps where he sat, curled against the base of the stone bench, his breathing slow and even. I don't wake him. There's time enough before true morning to carry him to the mat inside. And for now, there's nothing that needs doing the fire won't wait for. I sit a while at the water's edge, close enough to hear the tide moving in the dark without needing to see it. It has turned again, coming back slow and unbothered, filling in the long ribbons of darker sand it left at midday. The storm that gathered all day out past the water never broke. It sits still on the horizon, a deeper darkness within the dark, flickering faintly now, and then with light too far away to carry sound. The rain will reach someone tonight. It doesn't have to be us. Above the storm's low edge, where the sky is clear, the stars come out slowly, one and then another, until the whole stretch above the water is scattered with them, small and steady. I think of my uncle without the ache it once carried. Only the shape of him left now, his hands around the clay pots, his voice telling me the sea doesn't owe us gentleness, only what it has to spare. I think of the woman upriver who'll receive the small jar of balchet in a few days' time. Small, unremarkable things, each of them carried forward by hands that chose to keep carrying them. Yun stirs faintly against the stone bench, murmurs something too soft to make out, and settles again. Tomorrow he'll wake and ask what there is to do, and I'll hand him the axe and the jars and another ordinary day. The fire is low now. The embers glow like stars. I am ready to rest,